I want to focus on Moses today, that great leader of God's people in the Old Testament. One of the things that we can see about Moses in the scripture was that he had a real heart for his people, the Hebrews. And this was true of Moses even before God called him to be their leader. We can see this come through in an early passage in Exodus 2, verses 11 through 14. It says this: "One day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. Looking this way and that and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and buried him in the sand. The next day he went out and saw two Hebrews fighting. And he said to the one who was in the wrong, 'Why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew?' That man said to him, 'Who made you the ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed that Egyptian?' Well, then Moses was afraid and thought, 'What I did must have become known.'" Well, in this passage, we really can see that Moses had a heart for his people. He was concerned that they were slaves under hard labor. He was troubled that they were being mistreated by the Egyptians. He was troubled that they were mistreating one another. But we can also see that when Moses took matters into his own hands and relied on his own wisdom, his response to the problems that he saw was not good and things went wrong. What he did was terrible. And on top of that, it damaged his credibility and ability to have a positive effect in the future. And so often we find in life that our good intentions are simply not enough. Too often, the solutions that we seek or the way we go about them is off the mark, or it gets off track somewhere along the way. The truth is that we really need God's wisdom and guidance. And when we rely on God's wisdom and guidance, things tend to go a lot better. Now, later on in Exodus, we see that God calls Moses and puts him to work, and we see that same heart for his people in Moses. But we also see that with God's wisdom and guidance, Moses is really able to do some great things for his people. You see, our heart for people and for the causes that concern us is best utilized when we first have a heart for God. When we're trying to rely on his wisdom and direction and understanding ourselves as accountable to him. So where are the places in your life where you're most likely to take matters into your own hands and to rely on your own wisdom instead of relying on God's wisdom and guidance? I want to invite you to try to identify those places and begin to come at them at a different way, to start with God and seek in your heart to trust his wisdom and his guidance, to seek to do things his way, even if it's the harder way, to let him really lead you and see what happens. I think this approach is really summed up in Proverbs 3, 4, and 5, which says, "Trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." One last thing. We also need to recognize that Moses blew it here about as badly as a person can. He sinned. But God didn't reject Moses. God actually transformed Moses. So we can know that in those times and places when we blow it, if we continue to turn to God, he will renew and transform us and continue to use us, maybe even to do some pretty great things.